Committee Member Trunko? Here. Committee Member Jackson?
Here.
Committee Member Heisman? Councilmember Gross?
Here.
Councilmember Jordan?
Here.
Chair Kalouza?
Here. Very good. Everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Of course. Any changes or corrections or discussion? Motion to approve?
You got it.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you all.
Let's get right into some really interesting updates from Joe.
Well, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you all first for being here. We do appreciate you fitting us into your busy schedule. And those in the audience, thank you for being here. You're the reason we're doing all of this, to try to solve a problem that's been with us for a long, long time. As you know, back at the conclusion of 2019, this committee spent a great deal of time working with the consultant CTC Technology and Energy on identifying some approaches to solve our rural internet access issue. Thereafter, once we had that report, the next step from that report and discussions with the consultant and committee members was to develop a request for proposals and focus that on a fiber optic solution with a minimum level of internet speed associated with it. The committee was integral in reviewing the request for proposal that was prepared by the consultant, and ultimately that proposal was issued on January 2nd. The first key date associated with it was about 3 weeks later, and that's when questions would be received from those recipients of the proposals relative to its content. They being the recipients, had about a week to submit the questions, and then the department was required to respond no later than January 28th. We only received one set of questions, and that was from Whisper ISP, one of our current providers via a wireless network. And at first, the department was a little discouraged in that we didn't get more questions indicating a greater level of interest. CTC Technology and Energy had created a list of potential providers of services. That list had 90 or so different companies and firms associated with it. Some recognizable, like Bays ET, who's in attendance tonight, and others like Spectrum, one of the largest providers of internet services in the St. Louis region, and many, many others. Shortly thereafter, when the question period closed and the response to the question had been posted and delivered to the recipients, I started getting more questions. And so that's the first step the department did, is we extended the question period through about mid-February. And we are still receiving questions despite the deadline for the letters of intent to be submitted, which was Tuesday, February 4th. As you can see from the stamp date, a lot of them waited to the last minute, but we received 7. And I think that's a real positive, and it's a range. 2 of our current providers, Whisper ISP and Bays ET, were 2 of the 7. Spectrum is one of the 7, and then 4 other companies that I don't necessarily know as well as probably Mr. Jackson and Ms. Jordan, who work in the industry, but we certainly told all of them we appreciate the interest and hope we can help to bring it to a successful conclusion with the submittal of the responses.
Are you still receiving questions from people outside that list?
Not so much anymore. Yeah.
Is the list of people that responded in here?
It is not, but I can provide that to you.
Yeah, I'd be curious on the others who they were.
Yes.
I think it was online, right?
Well, that's where.
I think I read it online.
I knew we were having the email. I just, where's that in the document?
You're on a roll, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine, please, anytime. So what we provided for you tonight is the 7 letters of intent. And today we put together from the internet just the background information on the 7 firms, companies that did submit their letters of intent. So at least you could take that home and look at it and get an idea of who, what, and where, and why. generally speaking, and then if you want to do more investigation, certainly you can do that at your leisure. So what's left, based upon the addendum, the deadline for submittal of additional questions is February 11th. The department has till the 20th of February to respond to those. But the key remaining date is April 3rd. That's when the actual responses to the RFP, the request for proposals, are due. As I say, I thought 7 was a good number, and I hope you do as well. Certainly having our 2 providers interested is indicative of their commitment to the city, and we appreciate that. Despite Mr. Bay's presence here, I was very happy Spectrum set the letter of intent. Certainly they may not be the fiber to the home, but as you know, they're offering service packages now in the 300 to 400 megabit download speeds. So certainly well beyond our base level that was established by CTC in the city of Wildwood. So that's the good news. We have 7 interested parties. I can assure you Kathy Arnett, Sam Anselm, our new city administrator, and I will do everything we can to ensure that those 7 need something before it's all said and done. We'll do within our power to get it to them and do it according to the RFP and make sure we don't taint the process along the way. Hopefully you've been able to review the memo I sent out yesterday. That's going to City Council for their Monday night City Council meeting. But at this stage, given that we are still in an active period with the request for proposals, I know there's probably hundreds of questions or thoughts in your mind. But I'd like to maybe not delve too deep into that so we don't give an advantage to one or the other. And try to keep the process as untainted as possible as we move to what I hope will be a successful conclusion. So if you ask me a question and I don't answer, don't take it personally.
So obviously, we're getting into a competitive process here with providers and so forth. So we have a whole matrix of things to consider as we move forward and what we're going to prioritize and what we're not going to prioritize. And that's going to be a whole process. That's going to be interesting.
Well, there's 2 things that make me very confident about whatever responses we receive. First of all, the first review, the first tier will be all of you, the people that represent the impacted parties, our households that don't get good service, those that are in the industry and understand it much better than Kathy and I. And then secondly, we're going to make it available to the public. The responses at this stage, I want their input as much as we can accept within the legal bounds of our review process. But I think hearing from those people, our residents, the households that have kind of had to suffer through years and years of missed opportunities because they didn't have internet. I'd like to solve that, and this seems to be the best step we've had to date. As Rick will attest to, and maybe a few of you have heard, we got close on 2 other occasions. One time with Pulse Broadband, who had just done a fiber to the home network in Rawls County, which I believe is up by Hannibal, Missouri, and then Spectrum. And I've had a brief conversation with Spectrum, and I made sure they understood, there's no hard feelings. It was a business negotiation. It didn't work out. You've continued to provide service to part of Wildwood, and you've expanded service where you can, where the households will pay. But this is our opportunity to basically find a solution, whether it's Spectrum, AZT, or whoever, and do it right, do it once, and be done.
My committee have questions, please? Yes.
Joe, did any of the recipients of the RFP that did not respond communicate why they did not?
Not yet. And our city administrator responded to your email regarding one of the firms that
Okay,
had
I've seen it.
expressed interest. His position was, is certainly we'll follow up with those that did contact the city, but ultimately didn't submit a letter of intent. But that'll be after we receive the responses on April 3rd. He thought it was best that we not be viewed as going out and trying to solicit the why and, well, would you be interested if we reopened, that kind of stuff. So his direction to me was just, certain, we want that follow-up, but we'll have to wait.
I guess the one thought I had is, some of the organizations are large enough that making sure that it's received can be important, but.
And I depended on CTC because I thought that was part of their responsibility as preparing the RFP and having that background across the United States in situations like this, to know maybe there's a firm, company that just, this is their sweet spot, so to speak. They know how to do it, but we wouldn't know because they primarily are out in Idaho or New Mexico. But I was counting on them, and I was pleased with the list, over 90-plus companies or firms. So, the success rate is just less than 10%, but that's 7 firms that think they can do the job, and that's what we want.
Will we have an opportunity when the proposals come in to question the providers?
I would think that depending on how many responses we receive, we would want to eventually assess those, obviously, prioritize those. And if there's, let's say, 7, maybe bring in the top 3 for interviews and actually have them explain some of the technical issues or some of the financing and things along those lines. But
I think
yes.
that would be good.
I would suspect there's going to be a lot of discoveries we get through all the providers, what set of services they're going to provide, what technologies they're going to use, what their capital structures are like, what our confidence is in completing projects like this. And, dig deeper as we go, I guess, and maybe change what some of our requirements are, but we'll find out.
I have a question, just take a little
Please.
tangent off of that. So you mentioned that once we get the applicants, then a decision would be made of the winner or winners. There could be multiple, honestly. So there's 2 ways that I've seen it done it both ways. One, you rely upon the consultant, and we are an advisory, and we accept the recommendation by the consultant, financial stability and all that other stuff that goes into it. The other way is that we form a committee, which would pretty much be us, and you'd have a full matrix, and we'd start checking the boxes. And then we come down to a finalist, and then you're working hand in hand. The latter is a considerable amount of time and work. And so, depending on, I'd like to know, my question is, which way do you think it would go, so I can kind of prepare myself.
Well, the chair and I had a brief conversation yesterday, which we always do before the meetings, just to make sure we haven't skipped something on the agenda or we're throwing him a curve that he's not expecting. And he had mentioned the matrix, which is the latter of the 2. I think we would be amiss if we didn't ask CTC to give us their opinion on the proposals and what might be the best mix. If it's 1 company, 2 companies, 3 companies. But I think at the end of the day, I would like you all to also offer an opinion, how that's achieved and how long that takes. I'm cognizant of you. Some of you work full-time, some of you have other interests. This isn't your only job, so to speak. So I don't want to be selfish and demand your time, but for somebody like you, Mr. Jackson, or Ms. Jordan, who's in the industry, for somebody like Mr. Brost, who represents the area where we have a major problem, for Mr. Kaluz, who's been here 13-plus years trying to make this work, and Ms. Trunco, who is a great example of somebody that's just had to suffer through poor service for years and years and years. I think you bring a unique perspective. So I'd be hard pressed not to say, maybe it isn't that laborious, 4-week process, but I'd still like you all to weigh in at some point.
I'm sure we will. So hopefully a lot of times they'll work themselves out from the consultant, and then if there's a decision between one or the other, like here's the top candidates, then I think that's where we would weigh in with a lot of time, and that's where a matrix would come in of how we make an ultimate decision when the consultant, it gets past their purview to make a decision. So hopefully it would go in that way is what I would think, the way we're kind of working this out during the
It'll be a
discussion.
big discussion, just figuring out how to lay that out.
Well, it's probably going to be pretty self-evident,
Yeah, I think
you know,
so.
up front. So.
Is CTC still under some performance obligations? And to what extent?
Through the submittal of the responses and then that review.
And then review those responses, and then it kind of stops there, or not?
Yeah. Then we can move on, you know, eventually whatever company or firm or companies or firms, I think the next role or consideration of the committee might be, as we implement the agreement, having CTC there to help us with that, to make sure, you know, that, hey, this is all going like it should, versus, wow, why'd that happen?
I definitely think when it comes to that stage and it goes to the contract, that we need to engage a telecom attorney. Not a regular attorney, but a telecom attorney. There are intricacies that are just not part of practical law, in my opinion, and experience.
Well, when I listen to Mr. Jackson or you talk sometimes about the technology, all the agreements, all the things that are going on, it's like, gee, so I agree. It goes well beyond the expertise that at least Kathy and I bring to the table, and I'm assuming Mr. Young wouldn't object either as our city attorney.
She's right, and there are telecom firms actually in St. Louis and in the state, so it's not going to be a problem to get them free.
All good news.
Well, I think so.
You know, we did our consultant, and there was financial issues when you look at ROIs and stuff like that, and so it'd be really interesting to see how they crank the numbers and where all the pieces fall.
Is there any opportunity to shave some time, do this quickly? I know I keep asking you
I
that,
know. And I can assure you, I passed that concern on to Dave Talbot and Tom Asp of CTC, and both of them came back and said that the RFP has a lot of components to it, and if you press, you may not be satisfied with what you get. And they're the ones that said, let's give them X amount of weeks, and when we did the calendar, we ended up on April 3rd. So I think the key will be, once we receive the responses, how we manage that time frame. I think that's where we can pick up maybe the
okay.
speed.
I won't
we want.
promise not to ask again.
All right, no, you're
I
fine.
expect it.
Anytime. Because, you know, I look out in the audience and I see people that are, you know, they're here because they have an internet access issue. I know April 3rd sounds a long way off, but if we do it right, you know, hopefully in a very short period of time, 2020, 2021, you'll start seeing that progress we all want.
And the timing thing, the biggest timing savings that may be a priority at the end of the day, where, you know, 5 providers are gonna take 2 years to roll it out, and somebody else is gonna take 6 months. I mean, there's maybe a spot where we're gonna save a ton of time if the numbers work. We'll see. I see that look at your face.
No, I've seen deployment. I just went to a whole deployment thing out in Reno versus, well, I'm not even gonna get into it, doesn't matter. But anyway, it takes a little time.
Well, and
Ask Baze. He's the guy that does it, so he knows.
But part of all of this too, again, is a key element is, you know, in the RFP, the city did state that it was prepared to provide financial incentives to make those ROIs, the return on investment, more favorable. And Ms. Jordan and Mr. Bros fought hard at City Council during the budgeting process to make sure that the rest of the 14 understood what that meant.
Thank you, by the way. Any more questions about, go ahead.
Well, mine's on a different side of it, because certainly not on the technical side. From a public awareness, participation, communication, how does something like this, I mean, it's great that we have people here, but it would have been better if there was 100 people. So how do we try to reach people during this process because part of it's going to be education as to, you know, the financial side, all of us. I mean, has the city crossed that in the past? Is there an approach that you've thought about?
Well, your point's well taken, Councilmember Bros, because we want to tamp down, I guess, the expectation and the anticipation to levels that are realistic, that we just can't we can't create miracles, overnight. I wish we could. But with the closure of the letter of intents this past Tuesday, I think the next step for us is to get that information out, put it on the website, put it in our e-news, put it on social media, and whenever we can, whether it's another meeting, have that information sitting out in a little like fact sheet. We got 7 of these, here's the companies, here's the timeline, that kind of thing. And then as we hit those landmarks, just repeat the process again and again. But if you all, as the 5 members of the committee, have any suggestions, or if the public does as we go to public comment, how best to do that, we'll be glad to try.
We also, just as a reminder, have a specific e-newsletter for rural internet that has 350, I think, or 340 subscribers. So 340 people were notified about tonight's meeting. So, I mean, I keep them, we sent out the RFP to those people and said, if you know of someone, share it and send it on. And so we are doing targeted, email relative to just rural internet.
It could be just because I'm on the committee and I pay attention to those things, but what was it, the West Journal? Is that
West
what
News
it's called?
Magazine?
Yeah, West Magazine. Yeah, whenever the city's laid out, Manchester, Wildwood, and every time I look at Wildwood, I'm always excited to see something about the internet in there. And I guess, do we do that? Do we reach out? Do we count on a reporter coming to us? Do we actually reach out for updates at the same time we're posting them for those that don't have internet, maybe?
I've tapped on his shoulder a few times about why conversation hasn't made the magazine.
Good job, keep it up.
He promises it'll come.
There's a gentleman that attends the city council meetings twice a month, Jeff Brinker, and he does the articles primarily for Wildwood, so yeah, keep twisting those arms out there.
I'll try.
I don't know what else I can do, really.
Kathy, are you still soliciting people to sign up for that too?
They can at any time, and we can do a little more targeted solicitation. I haven't done that in a while, although I take that back. No, wait, I haven't done it in a while. That was different. That was a stormwater newsletter that they just solicited. So we can ask, we can put it in the weekly thing we put on social media that if people want to sign up. And as you talk to people, encourage them to sign up for that, because they're not going to get a bunch of stuff they're not interested in. They're really only going to
That's
get.
actually a good
Like
point,
something we put on our
since we have this group here that's going to be very interested in knowing who they're going to be serving, and that there's actually a volume of potential customers out there, going on maybe a little harder push on awareness campaign, just to identify those people and bring them forward, both in the magazine and everything else. I mean, we found in the past that even though we've broadcast, they need to get on a list. They need to show themselves, not just let your neighbor say, oh, I put my name on the list, and the other 20 people in the neighborhood seem to rely on that. Even as much as we broadcast, they need to get their individual addresses and names on the list. So I don't know, maybe we can push that a little harder in light of these 7 prospect providers. Just thinking out loud.
We'll do that. As I say,
We got to keep repeating ourselves, I know, to get people to identify themselves, but hey, you've seen that.
Oh, yes.
You always have to go door to door.
Yeah.
All right, we beat that up. Anybody have more questions? All right, something got some excitement over the next 3 to 4 months. Then let's move on. I believe, Chris, I think you're up.
Well,
We
if
got
I
something
could,
else?
an explanation. Obviously, Chris is one of the 7 individuals of companies that submitted a letter of intent, so it may seem awkward that he's here. But as you know, Whisper ISP and Bays ET are still providing service to over 550 or 600 households in the city of Wildwood. And Mr. Bay has been working diligently, well ahead of anyone else on this fiber to the home concept. And it's very exciting. And he's completed 1 subdivision for all intents and purposes, and now he's in Ward 1 looking at Homestead, Shiloh and Three Sisters Farm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it would be amiss if we didn't have him here tonight to update you on what I consider a great success in Hawks Rest and the excitement I have about that area as well. And to those that might not be benefited by that, once the fiber's in, it gets easier and easier to extend it out.
Yep.
And so that's also the exciting component of it. So I wasn't trying to taint the process, but he just has some really important news. Before I turn it over to Mr. Bailey, Mr. Chair, the department has been doing a couple of other things. The woodpeckers up in Mr. Calusa's neighborhood are creating havoc with our first 2 pilot poles that have been there since 2012. We did replace one, and that was quite a process because we have to block part of the subdivision and they're without access for the time the crane's in place.
Just one-lane roads makes it very cumbersome for those that are upset about it.
A big shout out to them because we're recording this and it'll be posted. Thanks for your patience during that process. I didn't get one call, so probably tells you how important internet is. So, but we are maintaining the poles. I depend on Bayes ET to tell me when there's problems on their set of poles, the same for Whisper ISP. So we haven't just washed our hands of the wireless system. We still are invested in it. We still receive funds for the households that are served by our poles. It's a nominal amount, but we are receiving income. And so I just wanted to let you know we're still in the game there.
Go ahead, Chris.
So I brought some, unfortunately, raw data from our mapping systems and our data usage in the neighborhood. I didn't get a chance to make a pretty presentation. I've taken some time off with the family recently, so winter time, so getting some breaks in. At Hawks Rest, we finished the main line construction. It's actually been done for a couple months. We have a total of 32,000 feet in the ground in Hawks Rest. Hawks Rest was quite a unique challenge. We got a little bit of everything in there. We're a regular 2-lane road. There's room to work on the shoulder, nothing in the way.
Mostly a rock burial?
Yeah, there was a lot of rock in there, very hard rock on top of it.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
It was a unique challenge. The sandstone and the other forms of rocks that are in the ground naturally are extremely hard and rapidly changing, making it quite interesting to use a horizontal drilling in Hawks Rest in a few places. But we got it done. We have a total of 39 people that connected on our first pass through, and we have 8 more homes to go back and connect that ordered after, and the ground's been pretty soupy, so trying to not tear up yards too bad. Most of the homes are on hills or some sort of extended run.
How many homes did you pass?
Every home in the neighborhood's passed. I'd have
How
to look.
many?
I believe
So
it's,
I'm just thinking take rate in the back of my mind.
I want to say there's
percentage.
54, 57 built homes in the neighborhood. I'd have to look at the.
You had 57 built homes and you connected how many again?
39
80%.
was passed on 39 homes connected on the original pass.
So 57 homes passed, about 39 connected?
Yes, on the
And then
initial
another
build.
8 coming? Got it, that's
Yep.
high take rate.
Like 85% or something like that.
Yeah, people need broadband.
Yes. And we had a total of 5 wireless customers that chose to stay wireless, so on top of those subscribers.
Now, what's the difference in cost between wireless and maybe rates versus fiber optics?
The fiber, we discontinued offering our $39 plan. The $49 is our lowest plan that we offer on the fiber right now, just to help cover the cost
And
of
what
putting it
about
down.
the plan for wireless? What's the lowest plan?
39 on it, it's $10 a month less on the bottom plans. From there, it's the same.
Oh, okay.
They're happy with what they're getting, so.
What's the throughput at $49?
On fiber, it's 50, and wireless, it's 6.
What's your megabits on your lowest rate?
On the fiber, the lowest that we're offering is 50.
50 meg
Yep.
for $49.
Yep.
Want to compete against Charter in
Would-
my area? Run some fiber?
On our top plan, the $89 plan, we're doing full gigabit.
Getting that?
Symmetrical?
No, it's 1,000 by 500.
Oh,
So
well,
close
it doesn't
enough.
matter.
The top service rates will be available in Hawks Rest once we start the Homestead Estate project. We have the time together to our fiber haul there. Right now, the Platinum service is landing the 400 to 600 range, depending on the time of day for the actual peak out. It's being fed with microwave at this point, so the very top end of it's going to be dependent on the traffic load in the microwave. Once it's tied back into the Homestead project, it'll be full gig on the Platinum subscribers. The middle plan's 300 by 100 for the other point on it. The next page, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I said, that's great.
That's what we're hoping for. The next page is a little tidbit I was a little surprised to see, honestly, after getting the project in the ground. The 2 pages kind of go together. The red graph is the fiber-only subscribers. That's the actual recorded history from all the subscribers over the last month. Each notch on the bar graph is an hour that day, so as you see the utilization go through, every night those approximately 40 homes are averaging 200 meg data consumption. And there's peaks above 400 meg for a whole hour average, so it's getting quite a bit up there.
What's your capacity?
Today, there's 768 meg going over, but it'll be 20 gigabit served to the neighborhood when we complete the mainline project along Highway 100.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Absolutely. You're part of the group here.
Sure. Mr. Bay, so you'll be running, you have fiber run along Route 100 to Hawks Rest?
It will tie back into South Wild Horse Creek, where we've got a ride from Windstream.
Okay. Windstream?
Mhm.
Okay.
They actually, one of their major backhaul components runs right through Wildwood.
Just can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So all this, is this still, you're feeding wirelessly?
Today, it's served with, the backhaul is done wirelessly. It's not done on fiber optic.
So would this heavy usage with them in there, would that impact usage down the line to other wireless?
No, we built a
They're
new
separate?
chain just for them. Just to get the fiber up, get an adequate amount of data fed to it to start offering the higher packages, and we get the main line tied through.
Okay.
So I don't want to get into RFP stuff with all the providers we got going down the road, but it begs the question, because you're just now kind of seeing some results from your fiber outlay. How's the business model looking for you?
Hawks Rest, there wasn't a whole lot of business model on it. It was more or less, let's dive into the nasty stuff and see how the
Kind of what I'm
equipment does.
asking, actually, is what are you discovering?
We incurred a cost of about $150,000 total to build Hawks Rest, so the ROI in Hawks Rest essentially isn't there. We won't see an ROI out of the neighborhood, hands down. The biggest component of that build was that is probably the most difficult segment of rock that we're going to run into in Wildwoods, why we tackled that one. It was one of our more bottlenecked poles. We had a hard time serving certain portions of the neighborhood, so it made sense for us to use that as our pilot in Wildwood to go after, one, the bad ground conditions, and two, to relieve the stresses on the wireless in the neighborhood.
So was that cost a learning curve cost that
Essentially.
you look going forward to improve upon?
Definitely. Outside of Wildwood, we're between $1,500 to $2,000 a home that we build to, including homes that we pass and don't connect. So our costs in typical ground conditions, what we're going to run into in Shiloh and Homestead, it's still going to be a little bit higher as we have to build almost 2 miles to get to the front of the neighborhood, but the costs are going to be approximately a third of what it was per home in Hawks Rest to do neighborhoods like that. The downside, though, that is a solid demonstration of how high the cost can be to remote homes in places in Wildwood. So those terrain features, they're somewhat common in Wildwood, but the topographical features that we had to fight with, the types of rock, at least according to the USGS, aren't as common in certain areas than they are in others.
Are you going aerial, can I remember, for some of the fiber?
We had started the process too. We actually just rented a different machine that's a lot heavier, a little rougher on the ground to rip in one of the streets that we were having trouble getting past. So we went back underground with it, and we've got that built. So now we just need a little harder ground so we can make the connection from the street to their home without trashing the yard. Jumping back to the data graphs, the next page is the total basic data usage at that pole as a whole, so you can see the remaining wireless customers as compared to the fiber customers. Also attached to the pole, there's about an equal number of wireless customers still on that pole that's served in other neighborhoods, Highwood Estates and the neighboring communities right by it. As you can see, the mass majority of the data consumption is all on fiber. So offering people those levels of speeds, they're using them. And the very last map, I figured the next question was going to be Homestead. The last map that's provided is the route and locations. This is that we're going to be building for Homestead Estates, Shiloh. Three Sisters, we didn't get enough response out of, but we're leaving it capable of serving them in the future, which will probably be the next project following once we've got enough response from them. The equipment head-in will be the South Wild Horse Creek pole. That's down here near historic Route 66 is how it's marked on the map. And we will be building back to Hawks Rest and then building down Wild Horse Creek and up around Rieger Road into the entrance of both neighborhoods.
So when you go back, you're building your ring out then?
Correct.
No.
The existing wireless networks that's in place and the wireless that we'd installed to get the higher capacities in Hawks Rest will stay in place as a fail point for the fiber if something were to happen to our major infrastructure. But chances are nothing will happen to it, but there's always a backhoe, bad car rack, there's things that can happen. So we'll leave the microwave system in place as a redundancy to the buried fiber ring.
You kind of doing subtending on your way as you go that way until you get your ring built up?
Right.
You know.
The total take in Homestead and Shiloh is 85 homes had requested the service.
Great.
What's your time estimate?
We'll begin construction in April. The project ahead of them right now is actually slightly ahead of schedule, so we may get started a week or two early, but it's that time of year that it gets very soupy, so that tends to slow us down a little bit.
Completion?
We should be done with it middle of July. It shouldn't take terribly long. The geological survey information we have for the region, the rock formations aren't nearly as hard as some of that we ran into in Hawks Rest, so we shouldn't have much difficulty in there rock-wise. There's not a whole lot of areas that we may run into rock anyway, and a lot of the grade is modified afterwards, so if we do hit some of the rock, it's going to be backfill, which is easy to get through.
It's great.
I'm sure you told me this before, but the conduit you're using for the fiber, what depth are you burying it at?
It depends. If there's existing water or sewer, it kind of depends where they're sitting at, but generally we're at 2 feet. If we're going to cross a body of water, a stream, something like that, we'll get 10 feet underneath of it. So there's passages in Hawks Rest that I want to say we had the drill head 25, 30 feet deep before we turn back around. Some of the creeks and ditches are there pretty deep. So gotta clear the culvert pipes. Someday they'll need replaced, and really don't want to have to replace that chunk of fiber when they do that.
I'm sure they'd appreciate it. I got fiber and I got my culvert pipe replaced.
Yep. So.
It's a task. Questions?
Keep it up.
The cost participation at the homestead is, I've heard numbers, is it $500 a home?
If we're doing a $500 install, that was to help offset the build cost to get there. So that won't be a normal it may not be a normal going forward, especially if we're awarded a portion of the RFP, but that's how we were able to make this project work.
Now, have you based that this will have an ROI for you that's acceptable?
Yes, this will be in a normal ROI window for us.
Now, along the path, could other homes connect to it?
Yes, we're waiting till March to file for the permits. We're going to attempt to get any of these small neighborhoods along the way to participate in the project. If they choose to, then the permit will include the work there as well. If they choose not to, all the small squares that you see along the map are access points for us to open the fiber, fuse into it, and branch off to other neighborhoods. It's just points for us to expand in the future. So it'll be set up and configured to be able to build off into any of the neighborhoods that we pass.
So feeding off what Larry just asked, it's only curiosity, but do you put up a little node at each property, or do you just bury it and dig it up later and tap into it? How does that work?
Have you ever seen the concrete lids kind of hanging along the side of the road?
The,
Flush with grade.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, it's under those. If you pull those open, it'll be either a fiber fusion box, a copper splice box, or
So is there already a box there with a splice in it, or is it
Mhm.
done after the fact?
No, any spot that we intend to access later, even if we're not fusing anything there, we'll go ahead and open the fiber itself up and lay it in a splice tray, so when we get open in the future, we don't potentially interrupt someone else's service. So it'll be open and
So
ready.
pretty much every property you pass,
Will be
and
available.
if it's a property that gets divided up later into 2 or 3 parcels, you just simply come out of that splice box.
Correct. We're using passive optics as well, so that's actually something I forgot to bring up. The way we're setting this up, each strand on our network, we get to use it kind of like how Charter uses coax, where we'll run one big coax chunk, and all the homes connect to that and feed off of a common carrier. The fiber we're treating in a similar fashion. We can connect up to 200 homes off one strand. We're limiting ourselves to about 40 parcels or 30 built homes, whichever number is higher for that strand, and stopping. So down the road, if property breaks up into however many sections or is high-rise, whatever happens, just for future thought, we simply fuse into the line there, add a tap and split, and connect them.
So when you run into a neighborhood that has max of 200 potential homes, there's not a lot of those neighborhoods, you still have, you run it's a multi-fiber strand that runs into it, right? You just don't
Yeah.
run a single strand.
No, just per strand.
I know that much, but how many strands is it usually going in?
It depends what we're running into. If it's a dead-end road, we'll put a 12 strand in, even if we only intend to use one.
Right, you got basically 10 backup at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
So his
As long as you
cost,
don't cut
his
it.
cost is the construction, so he wants as much
Right.
fiber as he can because it's minuscule, so he only needed 12 in that on the skinny route. But he may have 144 in his main
In the
line.
main trunk line.
Or higher. Where are you doing 32 split architecture at the FDH?
We're doing a uneven split and then going into even splitters.
Yeah, I've heard they started doing some of that.
Yeah.
So you can share, yeah.
Makes it a lot easier, so your
That's
backbone.
interesting.
It really makes it easier for us.
It's really taken hold in South America. That's like all that down there, and they're starting to do that here, so.
Yep, that's how we built Hawks Rest, is the uneven splits.
No.
So that's what lets us treat it like coax without getting too technical. We take a little bit of the light signal out of the fiber, then we fuse it into a point for customers to connect to. So if 2 customers buy today and the 3rd home buys, we just open up the box, there's a fiber laying there empty just for them, and we'll fuse them on it. We don't have to actually cut the line. We just attach them to a point that's waiting. In a larger neighborhood, say there were 200 homes, chances are we'd build it set up for 300 or 400 just because of the way the split ratios break out. We always like one extra jack there for us to test, and then we like extra room in the link budget. So to actually stretch the system to its limit is going to be pretty difficult as far as a connection per home. And what we're building in Homestead and Hawks Rest is being configured so we can use the 10 gigabit PON. The technology is pretty new on the horizon, but it's far enough in development we can see the technical specs for it. So the fiber that we've put in Hawks Rest and what's going into Homestead will be available for 10 gigabit once it's a little more common and proven technology.
Who has 10 gigabits? Sorry. Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, that's getting to the point where it's difficult to figure out a way to actually use it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, most of us would never, not in the near future, ever use 10 gig for their house. 1 gig, believe me. I don't know, I bet most of them can't even use a whole gig.
Open up an internet company out of my house.
Yeah, it's difficult to actually utilize a gigabit into its entirety.
It's a lot.
Is that your report, Chris?
I'm sorry?
Is that your report then?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Any questions? Yes, move on, I guess. Questions?
Sir, I think it's time for public comment.
Yeah, seems a little quicker than normal for some reason. Okay, this is the time. If anybody has any questions, not that any of us can answer them, but grievances or compliments, we like those too. Identify yourself, your address, and speak up. Yes, sir. Your
I'm in
name?
Shiloh Valley, and I think you've got like 80%
It was
from Shiloh.
It was a pretty high percentage take rate. It met the RI goal. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it was close to 80% is what we needed for the minimum to make it a viable project.
And I do know there's several houses there that will sign up that have not put their name in there.
Yeah, we've run into that a lot, unfortunately. It's,
But my question is, I filled out a form, I sent it in, do you have these names and will you contact them?
yes, everyone that filled out a form and responded actually on these maps, which what I had shared with the committee here. All the homes are already pinned out, mapped. We have all their contact information. Everything that we'll need to reach out once we get close. We'll send pre-construction letters once we get a little closer, just so people know that we're there and it's not somebody else. So try to.
We're looking forward to it.
Good. We try to be a little hyper-communicative with it because it is noisy, it is a little messy. We
Yeah.
keep
Now,
tidy,
that's
but
you need access, that's a private road, do you need, I assume the city has a easement there on the road there, have you got all those, and those are?
we'll be filing all the permits in March.
Oh, okay.
You have utilities, so those easements are there usually.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Not sure about your situation exactly.
Yeah, generally if there's AT&T already there, there's a general utility easement.
Yeah,
There are-
and they're underground, everything's underground.
Okay. It's generally, it's a for all utilities. In some occasions, we'll run across them that are specifically named, but
Right.
so far that
If
hasn't been
not,
much of a
Joe's here to
problem.
fix it, right?
We'll do our best, sir.
Can't you usually fix those things? Perfect.
Well, the city holds a lot of easements plus right-of-way, and we assign those to the AZT to accommodate the project.
Got it. Thank you for your question. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Joanne Goff, Ward 1, neighbors with
Yep.
Richard and Mr. Gross over here as well. Just to chime on to Larry's comments about the communications, I do think that anything you can do to push that out, I can tell you from my own perspective, I've only lived in Wildwood a little over 2 years, but it just seems that what comes out in the newsletters, I know that it's a slow process, but it's not like there's a lot of information there. So I haven't always understood what was going on at the meetings, or it was actually Larry put a post out in our subdivision Facebook that kind of inspired me to come tonight, that, okay, I need to show up and really see. And I think a lot of people, like our own subdivision, I mean, people, they grouse about it, but they don't really know enough about what's going on, and the more we can get people engaged, perhaps that would help. But the other piece of it is also the cost. You asked about, like what's Homestead gonna cost, it's $500 install. Ooh, it seems a little hefty, but I understand what we're dealing with and the problem, but that type of communication, because people are they're gonna go, oh, great, fine, you finally did something, we've got an RFP, you pick somebody, but if it's gonna cost us $2,000 a home or $1,000 a home, that might stir up a lot of eggs. So however you can figure out to communicate
We
more
don't have a
upfront.
clue to those answers yet.
Yeah. Oh, I know, you don't have any of those answers, but the
So
whole
you hate to- you hate to
communication
speculate,
process,
even.
getting there is the key.
Can I respond to
Yeah,
her?
please.
Yeah.
With the RFP, with respect to that, your comment about hurling about it and everything else, I think it's going to be really important when it gets to that point, and there is discussion about cost and funding and everything else. It's a good time to start coming to council meetings and expressing your thoughts. Because, I mean, we are a city and residents' voices are what make things happen. So I think it's going to be a really important time for Ward 1, Ward 6 residents to come up to the podium and take a couple minutes and speak about the importance of internet and contributions that the city might make versus
Don't
home.
disagree at all, but I think that circles back to that people have to understand what's going on.
That's right.
And engage them and invite them to share their, and that's really all I'm trying to say, because it took a simple post that came out in our subdivision group that finally inspired me. Not that I don't read the newsletters, I've been to some council meetings, but I had not been to one of your meetings, and I took a lot of notes. It was a wealth of information, and I wish more residents, maybe it's that one thing you do, inviting more people to sign up for the newsletter. Maybe it's something, if you could get West News Magazine to do an article. Everybody gets, touched, reached in a different way.
You're right.
So.
A lot of people are shocked that it just can't get done yesterday. And believe me,
Yeah.
if we could make it happen, we would.
Yeah, well, and like I said, it's an eye-opener for me tonight. It gives me a new appreciation of what you're dealing with from the timeline, from a cost perspective, I get it. But
The whole
I
problem.
do think communications, if you want to get the residents more involved, anything you can do to inspire them, because they'll sit around and complain about it. Me included.
Yeah, I think
So-
what people like about Wildwood the most is its lack of density and, you know,
Yeah.
wild woods.
It's in the
The
charter.
costs go up like 700%.
What you're saying is in the charter to be in, 5 acres, rural.
That's right.
So that causes, right, so from my perspective, I know I'll be looking at RFP, I'll answer it this way. I'll be seeing the areas that are no-brainers to serve, and then the areas that aren't gonna have it for a while as fiber gets deeper and more people build and so on. Because I'd be concerned on the communications where you get people all fired up, and what happened the first time with charter, it doesn't happen. That can also have a negative consequence, and I know that if I cared about being a politician and I was on the city council, I would for sure be kind of worried about how fast you get a message out. But once you get the RFP and then the message could ramp up because there's gonna be some happy people, and then so on and so forth. I'm not a politician, but if I was, that's probably what I would be thinking. It's my 2 cents on that. Be careful how fast you market it, right?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting marketing. I'm always suggesting just communicate what's going on and inviting more dialogue. Came from the corporate world, retired, totally get it. You have to be careful, but also being very transparent is important.
Mm.
And you can be transparent without overselling it, I do believe.
We'll have to keep those caveats in there.
Comments? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Matt McCowan, I'm a resident of Three Sisters, and we're on a subdivision, but I guess we didn't get enough participation. So are you able to tell us how far off were we? I'd like to help if I can.
I honestly don't remember. I can take your information and give you a buzz or an email this
Yeah,
morning
thanks.
and we can talk about it. It was just a matter of trouble reaching everybody, I think was the bottom line with it. So if there's a neighborhood means of communication, Facebook or whatever post, I'm sure we can get that added right back to the project. Worst case scenario, if for some reason it doesn't come until we're already done, the project to do just Three Sisters wouldn't be nearly as large. It'd be a lot easier to take care of at that point.
Okay.
Sir, do you live more toward the
Great
Homestead
name.
side or more toward, let's say, the Pond
Huge.
Road side or?
The third house end.
No.
Third house side, okay.
House over here.
I was just thinking, is it an easy jump?
Honestly, I did most of the mapping back in October and November, and it's not very fresh, so I don't trust my memory too well. I don't recall it being terribly far, but I don't want to overstep on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say that this is just incremental growth that you could expand out from the current infrastructure or lines, kind of like I think what Chris was explaining here? Is that true? Is that what the RFP then does, is define your most effectiveness or the greatest effectiveness?
Well, we built on a wireless network, and we've come to the realization, well, we didn't have anything before but dial-up, and we came to the realization that that's not going to future-proof the city to where people's digital needs are going to. And that's why we're talking fiber and coax and looking at new providers that can get us to that next level and future-proofs us forever. I mean, once you start getting into, we've had that commentary, once you start getting into gigabyte speeds, there's not even a forecast right now of being able to utilize all that. And that's really the next step in the technology. We haven't been able to do that before. Those costs are, with our low density, is huge. Chris here is probably our first of our 2 providers that has actually delved into that. And I mean, he's heard us talking, knowing we're going that way. And we know we have to get there. Our current technology, we're not thinking will get us to that next step, which is coming before you know it, we think. You want to add to that, Joe?
Well, the request for proposals was originally constructed by the consultant and did not require 100% coverage of the unserved or underserved areas. That was corrected. So the request for proposals that went out basically does not leave anybody behind. Is that realistic? I've heard no, because there are just certain home sites that are just extremely, extremely expensive or difficult to reach. But we didn't want to necessarily start with a handicap, so to speak, of you're only doing 80% or 85%. So in principle, everybody that is underserved or unserved is part of the RFP as written. Now, let's say we get to the next stage and there is a provider and that provider says, okay, I'm ready to go. I think it's going to be an incremental build. It's going to take, I don't know, a year, 2 years, I don't know. But that'll be the good news, is that when they're building and we can hopefully say, yeah, we know a timeline now.
So generally, you're saying it's incremental from what's out there, you extend from that point, right? Okay.
That, particularly like in the case of Spectrum, I'm sure they'll build from wherever their service ends now, and they'll probably do an analysis. This area has more homes, although it's low density, there's more homes in this area. This area doesn't. So I'm sure they'll do some cost analysis along the way. But our role, when we formulate an agreement with either one or multiple of the respondents, is to make sure that we have milestones, we have things in that agreement to ensure that, hey, we've picked the low-hanging fruit, we're done. No, that's not going to work, because our intent was always, we're going to try to serve everyone.
Well, Scott touched on that. It's like, we don't want a provider to come in and say, we're going to take cherry pick the 30% easiest, cheapest targets and let everybody starve. You know, we're trying to get the job done. We say 100%. We realize, you know, if somebody's at the end of a 5-mile gravel road that's going to cost us $100,000 to get a line back there, that may have a problem. Maybe, you know, but even in that case, we've said in our RFP, if you can't hit it, what are the options to hit it, and what are the costs involved? So at least we have a baseline. You know, maybe it's wireless or something, a node we put at the front, or I don't know what the answer is. That's where we're bringing in, you know, prospect providers to answer some of those questions with their own budgets in mind.
To put a visual to it, so Chris over here talked about not making his ROI in one area. It helps him complete his ring, of course, so it's needed, I'm sure. But he's not really making the money for the foreseeable future in one of the subdivisions, because he's making it on the other, so he's sharing that across to build a ring. And once he has a ring, we hope all the respondents, including Chris, would take that similar approach. So that's a visual. He said the same thing as what the intent of the RFP is, and he practiced it.
Did I answer your question?
Good, thank you.
All right. Somebody else? No? Come on. All right.
So,
You have a question?
Chairman, Dan Georgevich, I'm from the Pacific area, and I'm not actually a Wildwood resident. Been in this industry for a while now, and familiar with the Wildwood project. I'm pretty sure there's a photograph of Mr. Chairman tightening a bolt on that first bolt 12 or so years ago, and I know who took that picture.
88 feet up.
Yeah, about that. So the interesting thing here is you look at where that was 12, 13 years ago, 13 years ago in the planning stages, probably maybe 14. We were hoping to get 1 megabit or something close to that, just something that worked above dial-up. And now listen to what they're talking about today. Gigabit, hundreds of meg, but our needs have changed at the same speed that service has been delivered. I live in an area that's AT&T served, and I would think I'd get really great service, but it's a 3 meg service. Luckily, I have beta service as well, so I don't use AT&T service. So one thing that people are in the room, I know everybody's excited to get it, they want to get it, the council wants it, the committee wants it. It's been a progressive project, and it's made tremendous progress. And if you look at it, it's not just how fast can they play that in, it's the planning, the engineering, the construction is a piece of it, the permitting, the backhauls that support this network, and what's going to be carried over the network, the technologies of the network itself. As you're building it out, they're coming out with new components that you integrate that suddenly make it do things that they couldn't do before. And the needs are there. Sometimes the needs are exceeding the technology. It's a constant juggle. But when you actually sit there and you break this whole thing down, there's just been tremendous progress from the committee, from the city, and the providers doing it. So, you have to stop and think. I've seen, I do work in the industry, and I've seen commercial buildings in St. Louis County take well over 6 months to a year to put service into that building for a 10 meg service. You know, I got list of those. But we're talking about putting much more than 10 meg services into everybody's home. But I can tell you most businesses, a large majority of most businesses, run well under 100 meg to their commercial businesses, serving tens and sometimes hundreds of employees. So when you look at these speeds, I heard Mr. Jackson mention, is it symmetrical? Unless you're into a commercial product, they're never symmetrical. Charter's not, AT&T's not. Nobody runs symmetrical service unless you're paying commercial business grade quality stuff for it. That stuff just isn't out there. The nice thing is when you look at the technologies of what these providers, the RFP is going to bring, this is going to bring an infrastructure and backbone to Wildwood. But as Mr. Vunich mentioned, there's possibilities that some homes are down in a hole that it's very difficult to get to. How can you get to them with that fiber? Maybe you can't. Financially, it just doesn't make sense. But can those providers or another provider, maybe one of your existing ones, do some type of a hybrid off of that? So again, nobody's left behind, you get 100% coverage. Is it going to happen in a year? No. Is it going to happen in 2 or 3 years? It's been going on for 13 years. And it hasn't stopped and it won't stop. This won't be a project that completes in 3 or 5 years. It'll be an ongoing one for many, just like it is for Charter, just like it is for AT&T and everybody else. So as council and the you know, residents and committees keep that in mind, there's just so many components, not just the time to lay the fiber in, but to build out to it, the engineering, the technologies themselves, and what the needs are. So it's a very, I'm very impressed with the progress over 12 years.
Thanks for the commentary.
Thank you.
Next, not all public, so we're not set, I think we're not going to set that next meeting until we have more information in the door
We're
about
gonna
the
set-
responses.
Pardon me, I interrupted you. I apologize. The RFPs are due on April 3rd, so once I receive them, I'll get them out as quickly as I can. But I'm thinking within that first week or two thereafter, try and get the group together, the committee, and just start giving us initial impressions and laying out the process. So Kathy and I will send out an email with some available dates the week that I think the 3rd's a Monday. No, it's not. Bear with me just a second.
Yeah, for all.
Friday. It's a Friday. So the week of the April 6th or April 13th, we'll try to meet. We'll give you available dates where the building's available, so we can meet here and live stream and record, so people that can't attend can at least see what we've talked about. So we'll give you a few dates, and hopefully we can get a group together.
For the record, I know I've got to be here April 14th. I've got a meeting that's going to mean nothing for my company. And I know I've got to be in it. But, so April 14th is an FYI. I know for sure. You know, on my travel, I'm all over the place.
Probably, given the situation, we're probably going to be looking at a Wednesday or Thursday night.
15th and 16th?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just give us as much heads up as you can. We're getting to an important crunch point in this process, and I'd like all the committee members and council liaisons that want to attend if they can. So I'm just trying real hard to get us all at that meeting, I would say.
I may not be council liaison at that time.
When's the election?
April 9th, I think, 7th, I'm not running for reelection.
The 7th,
I'm done.
yeah, the
That's
swearing
right.
in would be the 27th.
I think Rob Rambo, might be before.
Is he the one that you ran against last time?
No.
Okay.
Rob Rambo, who's running unopposed for Ms. Jordan's seat, he was one of Bay's first testers for our wireless system. So he's been with us a long haul.
Is he interested in being a liaison?
I don't know, that's a decision made well beyond my pay grade.
All right. Oh, we'll find out, I guess. We'll miss you. You can still talk.
You did
right?
good work.
Are you saying you had all you want?
I'm saying I did my part.
Any further comments tonight from anybody that we should hear from? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Yes, take your choice. All in favor, aye. Done.
Thank you all for coming, we do appreciate it. Thank you out in the attendance, out in the audience for attending, we appreciate it. Chris, thank you as always. Good stuff.
Hopefully.